Director. We'll proceed with roll call.
Trustee Buckland.
Present.
Trustee Cartner.
Present.
Trustee Garrow regrets. Trustee McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Vice Chair McDonald regrets. First Vice McMillan.
Yep.
Trustee McCray.
Present.
Chair Petersman.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Line. Trustee Swan.
Present.
And Student Trustee Cindy Collar.
All right, we'll move to the approval of the agenda. Trustee McMillan, Trustee McAllister. Go ahead and vote. Put me in favor, okay? Please.
I'm still trying to get connected here.
You're in favor, though? We will have a consent agenda to deal with these items up front shortly. All right, so that passes. Move on to declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none, I'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? No motion to adopt the minutes. Trustee Cartner, seconded by Trustee McMillan, that the minutes of the regular meeting in public session of Committee of the Whole September 12, 2012 be approved and verified correct. Go ahead and vote. Lisa. Yeah, good. I like this. It's pretty cool. Okay, move on to the first item. Trustees, this item I asked to be placed on the agenda. It was raised at Management Council, and the question was, what involvement, if any, as a board, do we need to have or want to have in the naming of a non-school building? We reviewed the policy, which talks specifically about schools, and certainly I think there is an argument that might follow that because it doesn't specifically mention other buildings, that would mean that all others would fall under the umbrella of administration to go ahead and name. However, my thought and others at the meeting were that we probably should discuss it, just to run it through the board. And I think if we just were to make a motion stating that either just give verbal agreement to administration or pass a motion stating that it's not required for the board to be involved or approve the naming of buildings like this, I think that would be good guidance to administration and would just tighten things up. I'm not suggesting that we go as far as putting it in the policy, but just a general motion on the books I think would cover us. So that's that's the why it's here. And I'd be interested in if anybody has an opposing view or a supporting view that they wish to put forward. Rick, do you want to add anything at this point? Okay. So, do we, Bill, do you want to say anything? Do you want, okay, Ann?
Through you, Chair, would we be, no, I'm in favor of giving that liberty to the administration to do that, to make that decision. But what I wanted to ask, are we allowed to make some suggestions for names and pass those on to administration?
I think you can. I think that if I understand right now, what they've done is they've talked to the local trustee
Yes. of course.
David, and I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think that if you're aware and you have an idea, I don't think it hurts to forward it on
Okay.
to the team, but I don't know that we would have it as an agenda item to solicit those names, but I don't see any harm in forwarding suggestions on. Trustee McAllister?
I would like to see the process formalized a bit more myself at the board table, given recommendations by the administration, and I would like to see some input from the community as to what the name is or could be, because I think it should reflect the community.
Yeah, okay, I'll let other people speak. You want Trustee McMillan?
Well, just through you, Chair, I tend to agree that the way that the administration has been doing it, I have no problems with that. I just don't see this as an area that the board needs to get involved in. I can see long debates and really not accomplish anything more than administration could accomplish themselves. So I would like to see it stay the way it is and have us stay out of it. If we need to go in the form of a motion to formalize it, I'm for that.
Trustee McPherson?
Assuming this is in reference to General Vanier School.
Yeah.
Alderman, I'm a little disconnected right now. I've seen schools up in my neighborhood cease to become public schools, so to speak. The old Montague School is home to the Section 23. The group that is renting it simply refers to it now as the Dalhousie School. New Aberdeen School houses a T.R. Leger program, and it's still referred to as New Aberdeen School. The name never left it. So I think we've got a new process here because we are reinventing uses for old schools. And schools that serve T.R. Leger and other groups do not necessarily have a connection with the community like, say, the local public school. So I think we have to develop some sort of a process. There needs to be a bit of input, but it certainly won't necessarily follow the process that we go through, like when we rename a school to reflect its uses. And well, Queen Elizabeth Public School in Perth is now a full immersion school, and it's still referred to as Queen Elizabeth.
So, John, when you talk about, I guess I'm thinking that, these are non-school buildings. So how far would we go? Like, where would be the cutoff? Like, if we had, I don't know, but if we had constructed or obtained a building to put servers in or records, do we want to be involved in the naming of that? How would you decipher when we would be involved and when we wouldn't? I mean, it's fairly clear when it's a school because it's got kids in it.
Right.
And then I do think that there's a responsibility to reflect the community's interests.
I guess I'm thinking more of the public use to which it is put. If there's a lot of public use involved, then it would be, I think, nice to have some input into the naming of that facility. I don't feel strongly about this one way or the other, but I'm just...
Sure. Any other thoughts?
I have a comment, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're specifically talking about non-school buildings,
Yeah.
but I still think it's important to consult the community because some buildings are historic or have been in the community a long time. And for instance, I don't know General Vanier Secondary School, but they may just wish the building to be called General Vanier after General Vanier. And I do think kind of to get a feel for the community somehow is very important, such as when one of my schools in Prescott was renamed. I mean, there is a big rigmarole. It's their community, and their school or their building is still a hub of their community, whether it's Section 23 or a public school or a high school.
Okay. Any other comments? Trustee McCray?
Through you, Chair, wouldn't that fall under David's as the trustee to work within that community to, like, I don't see that as a role of this complete board. He is the trustee. He would work within that community to come to some agreement in regards to that. You
Trustee
know that better
McPherson?
than him.
Right. Trustee McPherson?
If I was going to make a change, I would say that that community is very familiar with referring to that building as either Vanier School or General Vanier School. I think the simplest thing would be for us to remove the secondary from its name. Same as New Aberdeen is still New Aberdeen School. It's no longer New Aberdeen Public School. The community identifies with it. The building has been called that for, Bart could tell us how many years. Would that not be, and because it's serving a multitude of educational programs, simply referring to it as General Vanier School would address all those needs.
So what, if you were to go down the road and you were to seek public input, what would our expectation be on what that would look like? Like how many resources would we want to apply to something like that? Go ahead, Bill.
In my opinion, given the scarcity of resources this year, we need to expend as few as possible. It is not going to make or break any of those programs in that school. It's not the name of the school that deems the success, it's what happens inside.
So if we created the test that administration would buy an ad or make it generally aware, some sort of attempt to inform the community, and ask for interest in whether they have any interest in the naming of the building, and if they see none, that they just proceed and do what they see fit. I think we need to. Trustee Buckland?
The original name was set on there by the administration 48 years ago. I see this as a non-issue. I mean, if someone from the public wants to create a name, then they go through Trustee McDonald, and maybe he'll present it, or if he has a name that he wishes. If not, let's just leave it.
Trustee Karkner?
I'm curious, Chair, as to what the process is for administration to follow through with this.
So it would come off as a school, so it would be ceased to have an ident number, right?
Right.
So then it's no longer a school,
No longer school.
and then I think it's a building at that point. It has no name. You can see why I see why I flagged it, because it was kind of like,
The question, Mr. Chairman, is there a tax implication if it's no longer a school?
Superintendent Gales?
Pardon me, there are no tax implications toward local residents or the board, as it's no longer a school holding an ident number. It's not entitled to receive any grants for a building under the principal. There's two grants. It will still, the students in the building for TR Leger will still receive grants as from the Student Foundation grant, but the Building Foundation grant they won't receive grants for. But there will be plant grants and whatnot, but there are no implications for taxes per se.
Trustee Karkner?
All of the programs that are run there now are under the jurisdiction of Upper Canada. Board?
There is some space being used by Upper Canada Learning Center, UCLC, correct? And then we have a TR Leger campus as well.
The Beyond 21 program.
And Beyond 21, so it's has many uses.
Beyond 21 is a community living style program specifically designed for Cornwall.
All right, so there is some interest in a process, but I am not convinced that it's broad. So I don't know whether we want to go through a motion, test it with a motion, or a recommendation to the board, I guess. Help me here, John.
Well, this one seems perhaps easier than others might be, because we know it is General Vanier Secondary School, and it has been that for a long time. Maybe it'll just be the General Vanier building, whatever, I don't know. But, I mean, what if, are we trying to set a policy in the future for such renamings, or are we just looking at this one?
I'm looking for general direction. Because if we're going to we have an expectation that there's going to be a process, then we'd have to create the process and then run the building through the process. I mean,
It would be my expectation that the trustee or trustees in the area would be consulted first, and that the administration would come up with perhaps a number of names, 2 or 3, to be presented, and with a recommendation that would reflect the history and the culture of the community, etc.
so I guess I go back and what if this were so is it because this was a school that you think this way? Or do you believe that should happen if we procure a building and put foundations and ABLE and another program in it? I guess, see, that's where I'm trying to figure out, like, are we doing this because it's an old school and it had a name in a past? Is that it? Because if we're gonna come up with a process, I wanna make sure that because those buildings probably don't even have names, right? Like, I don't know what they call them then. So maybe it's just old schools that we want to have that feature with, and I'm okay with that. I think that's if the board wants to go the route of a process, just asking them to do a discuss it with local trustees and present us with a name, that's fine, or a couple of names, or a recommendation for a name. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just, whatever we do, we need to make sure that we don't end up that every time they procure a new building or they rent a building or something, that now we're in a position where we have to do a name, bring it to the board to do a name.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to.
I don't see that as as part of the issue, frankly.
So Lisa, is your concern mainly because this had a name?
Yes, but my recommendation, like in a case like this, or in most cases, is why rename it unless you have to? Now, I understand it's no longer a secondary school, so just keep the name General Vanier Building. Most people, I find when we rename buildings, whether they be for school uses or other uses, people still refer to them in the community by the original name. They'll say the old so-and-so site. And I just think, but put it out to the community. It is no longer a secondary school under whatever regulation. It will be called the General Vanier Building is holding this. If there are any concerns, contact your local trustee. And at that point, I think if there's huge community outcry because the use doesn't match the type of name we have, then perhaps at that time it could come to the board table.
All right, what do you think of that, Trustee Buckland?
I don't see it as an issue, Jim. I would not change anything.
Trustee McPherson?
This could be rather an almost unique situation, because very rarely when we close a school do we repurpose it for our own needs. Like, for the most part, they're sold. SFDCI is now referred to as Cornelia Court, although 3/4 of the people in Smiths Falls refer it as the old high school. when we transform it into an administration building, like I believe it's Frankville Public School is no longer Frankville Public School. It is, the difference here is that we've repurposed it for educational purposes. And we've done the same thing with New Aberdeen, and I'm sorry, New Aberdeen is still New Aberdeen. We've got T.R. Leger in there in the foundations program. And I'm sometimes thinking, well, is there a need? Like, do we really have to change it, or we just take the signs off the outside and let the community call it what they want? They will refer to it as General Vanier School for the next 20 years anyway. Like, my concern here is that if we can do this on the cheap, fine. But if we're going to slide into a 3-month process where we're tying up administration time on something that really doesn't affect what happens in the building, like.
Trustee Richards, do you have any feedback?
I agree with Trustee McPherson. Take the signs down and the community can call it what it wants to call it. Do we really need to have a name on the building?
Trustee Kirkner.
I agree with what Trustee Swan is suggesting, that this is one case and it may come up on another case when we rejig it and use it for education purposes, but I think we have to take them as they come and not write a general policy. And I agree that, call it General Vanier, the name that has been there for years, and leave it alone. Take off secondary school. If there's any concerns from he can put it in a newsletter or however he communicates with his constituents in that area. It doesn't have to be lots of money and lots of people hours.
Trustee McCray?
I don't think it's an issue, really. I think it's, there's been a couple suggestions as how we might deal with it. And as far as changing the name, leave it the way it is until somebody comes forward from the community who feels that the name doesn't suit it. And I agree, I approach each scenario individually, because Karen Beck was another classic example. That building is closed now. Well, it's not closed, I'm sorry, but it's not a school. But we have T.R. Leger, we have a daycare in there, and until the community comes to me and says we want to change the name, it's Karen Beck School. It's Karen Beck.
Trustee McAllister?
I don't know if there's any need to prolong this one. I suggest we just leave it with administration, to tell you the truth. They have some idea of what we are thinking.
Trustee McMillan?
I agree with that statement. I think we just leave it the way it is. I agree with Trustee Buckland. It's a non-issue. And this is an isolated situation. I'd just like to leave it the way it is.
Student Trustee Collar?
Don't have any input.
All right. So, we'll do it on a case-by-case basis. If it becomes an issue, we'll bring it here. Are you okay with that, Lisa?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay. There you go. I don't think we need a motion for that. Thank you, everybody. Now administration, it's essentially what you're doing anyway, so we don't need to change a thing. All right, thanks, everybody. PPM 150, school food and beverage policy. You want to add anything to this, Superintendent Gales?
Well, I believe it's comprehensive. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that trustees may have.
Do we have any questions? Trustees? Trustee McAllister?
I guess with regard to the first motion, I'm just wondering, has the administration received any reports of substantial difficulties meeting the food and beverage guidelines?
Superintendent of Business, Gales?
The ministry last year was asking us to sign the compliance statement, and we indicated that we weren't compliant and would have difficulty doing that, and in all honesty, so we didn't. We indicated we were about 95% compliant. We probably still are. We're working with the supplier to make sure that we follow the board directive, which is to keep the cafeterias open. And we will work sort of over a 5-year period to become compliant. We have the 7s and 8s in most of our high schools, and for the most part, they're serving, they're eating in the cafeteria, they're making use of the cafeteria. So we're trying to develop them and make them attractive and inviting places for students to come in the general competition for funds that Jeremy has to deal with. Cafeterias are probably not way up on the top of his list, so it's if you get one thing, you have to give up something else, and so we'll work through this. We don't have a detailed plan of the things we need yet, but we're working on coming up with an approach to making the kitchens and the cafeterias in our high schools more attractive.
Go ahead, Trustee McAllister.
I think we really want to make the cafeterias sustainable and attractive, and it has to be part and parcel of a much larger education campaign to get students to start thinking about their own health and their own nutrition, and making wise choices with regard to food, even though the options are out there. It's a tall order, I recognize that, but nevertheless, it's, wearing seatbelts used to be a tall order too, and smoking. I think we have tackled those fairly well. And I think we just have to pursue it and keep at it.
Any other comments? So all of our high schools still have cafeterias?
Yes, sir.
Good. And we're not in danger of losing any?
Not that we're aware of. We've asked for a meeting with the major supplier, and as soon as they have some numbers for us and can put something together based on this school year, which is only 3 weeks old, they'll meet with us and we'll go forward with it from there. And we'd be pleased to report back at some point later in the year when we have something a little more solid.
Oh, we'll keep this on the file. I think that we do have to do. So we would expect a report, and certainly I think that we expect if something were to change, if you were to notice, if we lose a cafeteria, I think they'd have to come back. Director Thomas?
The trustees should be aware of a couple of issues. One is we have been fairly clear that the compliance issue was very difficult to deal with. Again, this situation perhaps did not have enough of a rural flavor to it and did not particularly identify with some of our schools, particularly Charlotte, North Dundas, Seaway, different schools that have significant away from other places, but that the high school kids could get in their car and very quickly get off to either the Lancaster McDonald's, or the Athens kids would quickly come into places, hit near the 401, or North Dundas would go off to the different places. And what happened was, because we had so many kids with access to cars, we were filling up cars and they were racing down the streets. That was a huge concern of ours. Quite frankly, anecdotally speaking, I believe right now, if we had not made the comprehensive decision to put our 7 and 8s in the secondary schools, we would have lost, I think, anywhere to 5 or 6 of our. Then what happens is the principals in our schools are demanding that the 7 and 8 stay at lunch in the school, as they really should, and they have to have special permission signed off by the parents to leave the school grounds. And so we have, in many cases, 180 to 200 captive kids and they have kept the cafeterias alive. I think the piece that I think where Trustee McAllister was taking this, it would have been really good if we'd been given some lead time to do the educational component, as we successfully did with our smoking program, our smoking cessation program, even with the adults in our buildings. Also take a look at the different things we've done to train to get ahead of something, and this might have been one of the ones would have been nice to have given 5 years to comply, and to look at this as a part of training students, training our staff, and then the whole aspect of modeling. But I think we're making some gains, but I really think the timing was perfect to have a lot of our schools filling up with 7s and 8s.
Trustee McAllister? Oh, sorry. Trustee
I
McAllister?
agree with what the director has said. I think the key here is allowing local, and I quote, allowing local cafeteria staff the flexibility to create menus that address local tastes, address local preferences, and begin the process of rebuilding a clientele. To that, I would certainly hope, I would add that, while there are local situations, perhaps we could, in the next report, give some consideration to best practices. Some may be more successful than others for various reasons, and if we can jump on that and take advantage of it, then everybody wins then.
That's a good idea.
Any other comments? Yeah, Trustee Collard.
I agree with what Director Thomas said. I've spoken to a lot of the councils, and they know for a fact that all the older kids leave when it comes time for lunch, and the only reason that the cafeterias are getting as much as they do is because of the 7 and 8s who are not able to leave. Although I'd like to point out that a lot of the younger kids have older grades go get them food and bring back to them as well. So that doesn't really help either. But now students are starting to see the health value the cafeterias have. But I think it would have been a better idea to take a longer period of time to cut out all the salt and everything, because the kids, it was just such a shock to all the schools.
Okay, good, thank you. Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. Trustee Collard, maybe you know the answer to this question. Do kids, high school students, leave the school property because the cafeteria is not serving them what they want, or do they see it as an escape from the school for a half hour, get off the property, get away from the building so they can come back, socialize beyond the property?
I think they see it as both. First and foremost, I think it's more of a socialization thing. They also take the lunch period to go see students from other schools that are close by, and to meet up at different places, because students from other schools cannot come have lunch in the schools at the cafeteria, so they would use other food places to meet up.
So just to follow up on that.
Yep.
So there's not a direct connection necessarily between the quality of food or the kind of food in a cafeteria and the kids leaving.
No, I don't think so. The students that do eat at the cafeteria, they really enjoy it, and I know the food is very good in the cafeteria, and there is healthier options, and there are options that are still really healthy, but the students don't think that they are, so they'll eat them anyways.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Trustee McRae?
I think that this, the whole change in eating habits has to be a change in culture. And I think in terms of the whole educational piece, we need to be, beginning with that at the primary grades, and then just as with the how smoking, it's not a cool thing to do right now, and then it'll filter up through our high schools as the seeds are planted, and then eventually, hopefully, there will be a realization that fast foods are not a cool thing to be eating for your health either. But that's going to take some time. And just as was suggested, rather than this 80% cut on fats and salts and sodium and all this type of thing, if the government had thought it through a little more clearly and maybe went with a 20% reduction and then a 40 and then a 60 and then an 80, rather than, hitting everybody with no salt, no sugar, no that type of thing. It was pretty drastic for some students that were used to not eating healthy. So I don't know if there's a way how we can implement more nutrition and healthy eating into our primary grades and elementary panel through the curriculum some way, or...
Trustee Buckland?
Thank you. You're right. For you, Shirley, it is a
Trustee
long-term
Buckland, sorry, can you just move your laptop to the side, so, because we want to hear every word that you're saying. The mic is just covering up your,
Okay.
so thanks.
How's that?
Good, thank you.
All right. It is a long-term thing. The 5 years is, I think, a short term. And I know in the rural schools, janitors have told me they're picking up more junk food bags, and there has been a slight surge in increase in employment at McHarvey's and those instant places. But it's an existential struggle. Let's keep at it, I had an interview with a 96-year-old lady. Now, she didn't know any of these things that the kids were eating, Twinkies and cocoa bars and so on. So maybe we can return to something that is, so I say keep at it.
I think that we have to remember that it's been touched on here in terms of the drastic, but this was far more than just trying to eliminate French fries and an over-reliance on hamburgers. I mean, they went after coffee and things like that. I mean, this went far beyond even the kids' understanding of what was a reasonable dietary adjustment. But I think overall, trustees, that this is an excellent example of local leadership and the appropriate use of local understanding. This was, as also has been said, was a policy memorandum that was created without any consultation that I'm aware of. It was communicated to us with very short timelines, and I think that we've really demonstrated that when you are working from a local perspective, you can bring value to the implementation of an idea that I think we all agree. We all want health and ensure that our students have a healthy lifestyle, but this was not the way to do it. So I think this is an excellent example of that. All right, thank you. Go ahead, Superintendent Gales.
Just, I'm sorry, sort of a final note on this from administration perspective. One of the great challenges in this, of course, is finding suppliers who will or who do manufacture foods that are compliant with this legislation. And that's been the huge challenge. And often manufacturers don't make breads, for example, that are compliant because no one will buy them in the market. They need consumers. And if the only consumer is high school, then they're not able to sell them anywhere else. Then they're not going to manufacture it because it's mass produced, it's mass production. So that's the huge challenge. If the manufacturers would decrease the salt, the sugar, and whatnot in the food that they're making, then it would become a societal, cultural change. But just to sort of drive toward the high schools, you know, in Ventley Collegiate, we have pictures of kids going across the street to the dépanneur, the grocery store, the gas station across the street, and buying a sandwich that, you know, that they have in the fridge there. God knows how long it's been there, but rather than a much better sandwich in our in the school cafeteria. So it's rather peculiar. We have chip wagons in front of schools. They're doing boom business. A lineup of kids. So it's.
Well, I think that what has been pointed out in this conversation is that the use of a cafeteria is not necessarily just to get food, right? Like there are other factors, social factors and things. So I think that it's something that certainly wasn't taken into consideration.
Point of procedure, Mr. Chairman, you're suggesting 11-12 school year. I think we should be looking at that towards the end of this school year. I'm not, April, May, something like that.
You're referring to the background motion in there? I think you're referring to the background. We put that in, we can create a new motion to extend it, but I don't know that we need to do that. I'm not, at this point, there are no motions attached to this.
Well, my only point, Mr. Chairman, is I don't want to see the thing die June to, December 2/12 or something like that.
So I do have a recommendation that administration continue to work to comply PPM 150 while ensuring the sustainability of our secondary school cafeterias. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Did the other motion, did it get passed by board?
The original motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna recommend to the board okay, that administration continue, and we'll bring it to the next board meeting and pass it. Okay, so can I have a mover? Trustee McMillan, Trustee McAllister. Question, comment?
Do we wish to put in that motion that a report back spring or June or May of 2013?
If you wish. You're gonna get the report anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
Yep, we're gonna bring it back.
Good.
And I believe also that if anything were to change, that we would expect a report back. So if all of a sudden we were to get notice that we had a bunch of cafeterias backing out, or that we'd get notice. Okay, go ahead and cast your ballots. Just as a note, I was at a graduation, and getting ready, a student was introduced, and he was coming across the stage, and the principal leaned over and said, the student paid for his first year of school by selling sandwiches out of his knapsack. And he had quite a little enterprise set up where he would collect orders, and I had some other inside information, so I was curious. I wanted to know how he went about it, see the mechanisms, admire this entrepreneurial spirit. And he had a list, and he would circulate the list, and he'd get the orders, and the students knew that they had to have their order in the week before. There were times when he had to have a second knapsack, and he was supported by his mother, who would show up just before lunch so that they were all nice and fresh, and he'd stand in the corner of the cafeteria and distribute.
Trustee Cartner was looking for innovation.
I thought that that was tremendous. And
Dragon's Den, here we go.
Beats gambling.
yeah, thank you. All right, so that passes. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Superintendent Gales, for dealing with this. Are we continuing to get much heat from our colleagues west of here? Our Queen's Park colleagues? Are they?
Rather fish, they're fried. Or they don't fry them, they bake them.
Yeah.
They seem to be a little surprised, taken off guard by the number of cafeterias closing across the province, and
Really?
so they asked for reports back from boards in terms of what was going on. So I sent the June report to the board to them.
But they're not holding it up and saying, see, that none of these, the school board doesn't have any closures. They are explaining why, I hope.
Well, I don't know whether they've.
Hate to think they were misappropriating our numbers. All right, thanks, everybody. I'll move on to the next item. The Old North Grenville District High School reuse feasibility study. You want to add anything to this,
6 pages.
Mr. Hobbs?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think it's a little dense, but it also self-explanatory if you stick to the executive summary. If you'd like me to summarize it, I can.
No, just if you wanted to. And you were talking about the report being dense, right?
Of course.
Just checking. Trustees, any comments? Trustee Swan, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think it's great they did a study, and it was quite a comprehensive report. I'm really glad we are getting usage out of the building right now, and spoke to Principal Hannah, and they're calling it, right now they're calling it an annex to KPS, and that's all gone really well. And I guess my main comment, though, would be is I have had some concerns or questions from the community in Kemptville as to when would we be looking at putting this on the table for surplus.
I think that as soon as we have confirmed that we have no further use for it, then we would. So I would think as soon as whenever the students vacate, the current students vacate it.
Okay, that's great.
They love the gym.
They do.
They love everything about it, including the usage of the soccer and the football fields, and they're hoping to even carry on that usage when they return to KPS once all the work's done over there. And the students are thriving, apparently the teachers are, and I really want to say thank you to facilities and to the staff and Principal Hannah, because she did a really good open house, and I haven't had one comment other than positive from the community about that transition.
So we're going to transition them into portables, correct?
Now you might get comments.
That'll be real. That'll be popular,
They aren't
right?
going to want to leave.
Yeah. Compared to portables, what's the cost difference? Is it much more expensive?
Mr. Chair, just by way of clarification, are you referring to the cost of occupying the existing Old North Grenville versus portables?
Yeah, because that's what you're moving to, right? You're going to move them back into portables once you have them?
Mr. Chair, we'll be actually moving them into an 11 classroom porta pack, so it'll actually resemble more of a self-contained school with hallways and additional washrooms and also air conditioning. So they'll be into there well before they'll have an appreciation for the air conditioning, but I'm sure they'll notice it in the summertime. The cost to maintain the existing high school, the operating cost, when we actually had it fully loaded with students, was about $500,000 a year, and that included everything from snow removal to custodial services. So it will be a fraction of that, but it'll still be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, just due to the fact that we do still have to heat the whole building and maintain the grounds.
Yeah. Trustee McAllister?
A point of interest is the Porta Pack as well as the annex presently, these are both temporary measures until a new school can be built? Right. Thank you.
Any other comments? I don't think we need to do anything with this report other than, well, thank you very much for preparing it. I think it was good due diligence to go through that and ensure that there wasn't, a possible use for it. And we'll look to receiving a request to declare it surplus sometime later in the year, beginning of next. All right, update on the grade 7-8 transition. Thank the director for his written report. Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I will speak to it. Phil, you want to join us? Through you, Chair Petersman. This literally has only just been finished in the last couple of hours, really. We have been visiting every school and every classroom, and I have been at every school, and I've not been in every class, but pretty close. I would like to share a story Phil to steal. You're probably going to share it. I was in Rockland in Trustee Carter's background, and it was quite interesting. I had a wonderful visit. They've done a very nice job. Facilities are very proud of the work they've done and how they've reconfigured classrooms, got new areas, and how they brought the 7-8s in. The staff in a very mature manner have responded fabulously to them. And I went into each of the classrooms, and there was one larger than expected classroom, and I think since that time, we've actually been able to bring some relief to that. The teacher was great, the principal, we had a wonderful visit. I turned to one of the boys in the class in the front, so, and who are you? And you look important. And I said, I'm the director. So what do you do for us? And I said, this other young boy chirped up, well, he's the one that put the 7/8 in the school. And I said, no, not really. I said it was a board decision and so forth. We went through and I gave him the background. And I said, just want to do a little survey with you. Put your hands up if you really enjoy your new surroundings. Every hand went up. Now I said, put your hand up if you'd like to go back to your feeder school. Not a single hand went up, except for this one outspoken young man. Said, now we've all voted for you, but let's say we'd voted to go back. Would you do it? I said to him, he said, you should be a trustee. And he then proceeds, we like it here, but would you? And I said, no, we wouldn't. And he said, I said, well, what do you like about the school? He says, oh, we like the phys ed, we like the big gym, we like the new teachers. It's really great atmosphere to meet new people as we go through. But it was interesting hearing the different kids talk. And the thing that I was very proud of, Jeremy, was the one young man said, we want a grade 7-8 lab. And I said, why would you want a grade 7-8 lab? We're closing labs. I said, right now in this classroom, you could have a lab right now. I said, every one of our classrooms is Wi-Fi. You can actually go in, and there were 3 kids in the room, and 2 of them, I believe, were special education students who had board-supported software and computers. And he said, well, we can't log in. And this other little boy said, I'm already logged into the board website right now. And so I turned to the group and I said, maybe what we should do is really work at a thing. We bring our own devices to school. And I said, if you have your own computer, your own device at work, and I voted, I said, vote again. I said, it was amazing to see. There's only 1 or 2 kids that did not have their own computer in a grade 8 class to bring to school to hook on and go live with us. And so it was interesting. We then had a debate in the class, a little debate that was very lively and very, if you are ever worried about what 13 and 14-year-olds are thinking and how sharp they were really, really, really good. And they kept me on my toes, and hopefully I kept them on their toes. But it was a real great opportunity to learn from each other. Phil Story, you're probably going to tell that story, but can you perhaps bring more detail to what I was sharing?
So congratulations on that, and thank you through you, Chair. It really is a great opportunity to be here once again to speak to, just briefly, what has become a bit of a tradition, I think, going out to visit as early on in the school year as we can, those schools that have made the move over to a grade 7 to 12 structure. And, time does fly. To think back that we had the Boundary 2020 review in 2008 and started our first wave, if you will, of the move to grade 7 to 12 schools effective 2009. And some of you may recall those are what we called our Team Apollo schools. And as a reminder, that was Charlan, Glengarry, Seaway, South Grenville, and Tagua schools. 2 years later, we made the move grade 7 to 12 to what we called our Horizon schools. That was Cornwall Collegiate, St. Lawrence Secondary, Gananoque, North Dundas, and Rideau schools. And now we've completed the process this most recent September with what we affectionately called our Team Discovery schools: Almont, Athens, Carleton Place, Brockville Collegiate, Thousand Island Secondary, North Grenville, and Rockland schools. So as I said earlier, it's been a bit of a tradition for us in the first few weeks of school to get out and just find out how's it going. And it's an opportunity for Charlotte and I as co-chairs of the Building 2020 process to see in action all of the hard work that happens in preparation for these moves. And it is a lot of hard work, but it's enjoyable work. We had meetings, as we do with the other 2 phases, throughout the course of last year with our school principals, with our administrative teams. There were, you'll recall, the transition teams that were chaired by our superintendents out in our communities last fall in preparation for the valuable information that went primarily to a facilities department. A lot of preparation work from communications right through to staffing, HR department, our logistics moves through the work of Ron McLaren and his team, a lot of work from the transportation folks at STEO, archiving through Liz Grange, who was with us, And again, a special thanks to facilities, because the incredible amount of work that has to happen in those schools over a short period of time really is a testament to the abilities of that group. And you know, the work that the school principals work through in preparation for this with their school staff, it's just remarkable to see it all come together. And of course, what we're really looking for when we go through the schools is see, is it working okay from an operational point of view? And I can tell you that we're very satisfied once again with how it's rolled out. But really, the proof is when you get a chance to walk through the hallways where those grades 7 to 8 kids are, and you see their happy, smiling faces, and you have an opportunity to speak to the grade 7 and 8 staff in those schools and see the joy on their faces, we can feel good about that. So again, it was a great opportunity to be with David that day and see once again that impromptu question and answer period from the grade 8 math class. But I had a few opportunities like that myself last week, and it was just a joy. So I'd be happy to, with David, answer any questions that you have. But we're just very pleased tonight to be able to say to you that we had another smooth start up on our grade 7 to 12 schools this year. Thank you.
Trustees? Trustee Kirkner?
Through you, Chair, is there any follow-up done with parents after these schools have officially become 7 to 12 schools? The reason I ask this is because I was at a parent council meeting last night at Rockland High School. And the majority of the parents that are now on council, they went from a council of about 4 people up to last night, I think there were at least 14 people around the table, mostly 7 and 8 parents. And the conversation was interesting to listen to the comments that are coming forward now from the parents. And I went to a lot of the meetings last year in preparation for this transition, and parents had certain concerns, and the schools listened to those concerns about keeping the kids separate from the secondary, the 9 to 12. And there were other concerns as well. But now the parents are changing their story, listening to the children who are in the schools, saying they want to be integrated with the 9 to 12. They want to be part of the clubs that 9 to 12 have. So the parents now have an expectation that it's going to be run like a 7 to 12 school without that break after grade 8. So I think it might be interesting if there's any move about talking to those parents who have now been through the transition and how they're feeling about it now. Just a follow-up, because stories are changing now, positively, but they're expecting it right now. And we know that it can't happen right now because the staff has to really work towards building that up. But they need to hear from parents who have been involved in the transition, 7 and 8, in the last 2 phases.
Yeah, and certainly that's consistent with almost, I don't know of any 7 to 12 process that hasn't resulted in the same feedback from parents. You know, it's the same everywhere. They all come to that. Once they're in there, then they forget that they're the ones who asked us to erect the doors and ensure that they were kept separate. So, do you want to say something to that?
Yeah. Trustee Kirkner, one of the things that we have listened to from the stories of Charlotte and Seaway is that the configuration of the kids, and certainly we're seeing it already very early at Almont, is that you have different staffs with different skill sets who, you know, they don't see the boundary at that 8-9. They're saying, you know, for example, at Almont, we already have the 7-8 teacher who's an outstanding music teacher with a great, we know her, we've seen her work. She's already doing clubs, etc. in the secondary where we had a week music program because, again, the teacher had retired, and they're just looking for it. We have other situations where we have very strong programs, and they're looking down at the 7-8, saying, how can we connect those kids to these other programs, whether they're science clubs or math clubs or choirs as you go through. That's serving really well. There is, however, we see a bit of a gap in two areas that we're going to have to look at, and we've begun a process that Trish Brown and your vice principal at Almont, Ron Ferguson, are chairing a look at creating a 7-8 intermediate sports division Because what we've already looked at is that in some of our areas, when you have a school, for example, that has 190 sevens and eights, and you pick your all-star soccer team, well, going down through the neighborhood is really not much of a competition. And what's happening is that we're going to create a policies and procedures within that saying every single school, before they pick their traveling team, has to run a comprehensive in-house intramural. Then from there to move on. And what we see, and we're asking Trish and Ron to look at, is the appetite for a intermediate style division league that would perhaps encompass all of our schools so that we'd have championships at that level. And it looks like there's a real appetite for that. And that's where we're seeing from the schools that are in their third, is that a science fair across the entire system of sevens and eights, doing some very sophisticated, innovative work with a drama festival that would take a look at that level. That would be very interesting for that group of kids to be involved. And we already have a couple of teachers in the Cornwall area who would like to put together an arts-related music festival that would highlight some of the outstanding work that the kids are doing. And now that they're in cohorts that are large enough that you can pull a whole choir, that you can build an entire choir there instead of having 5 kids from grade 3 and 6 kids from grade 8, they're able to do some things. So that group is meeting right now to address some of those concerns. But the issues that you raised before, that they want the bus to stop here, the kids go in this door and those doors, the chair's absolutely right. So some procedures and fences we put up now, they're saying, well, why did we do that? And we did it because, as you said, Trustee Carter, we listened to you at the meetings and you said this had to happen. I know Rockin, for example, the kids, the 7, 8 stay on the bus and then they go right around to the back door and they're going up that flight of stairs. And now they're saying, why? And I think the interesting thing there is that what we have seen happening at Seaway and some of the other places is that they're moving off on some of those things that they thought were, we wouldn't dare break away from, and they're actually holding to. So it'll be interesting in the next couple of years.
Trustee Carkner?
A continuation was, the parents last night were quite impressed with the link crew that was happening from 9 to 12. And they were quite upset that it didn't go into 7 to 12 and not, why are we welcoming the grade 9s in and 7s and 8s were welcomed in, yes. I mean, the principal was very pleased with the start of the school there, but again, the parents are hearing about these things going on 9 to 12. Why aren't 7 and 8 part of that?
Director?
We knew that was coming, but we had to move on the crew because we had such success at North Grenville. But I think what's interesting is what North Grenville has done will probably help us throughout. They have taken the grade 10s and are training the grade 10s to be link crew leaders for the 7s coming in. So what you're going to have is that the nature and spirit of the link crew movement in the school is next year we'll connect the grade 10s who were the grade 9s this year receiving that support from their link crew partner in grade 12. They're in grade 10. We're going to be the welcoming committee for the 7s, but the 12s will continue to work with the 9s, and you're going to build and this is brand new because Link Crew, who we've purchased the license to do all this with, they've never done this. They haven't seen it before, but we have some real positive leadership happening that says that they know that they can do this. So right now at North Grenville, they're really looking at this and going to work the kinks out. And I was at North Grenville 2 weeks ago, and they had their grade 10-7 assembly where they're matching the kids. And I think there's sort of something probably made by us, an Upper Canada model for the 7s. It really makes a lot of sense for what we're doing. I think you'll hear from that. We'll bring this back to the board table.
Just a response to that. As you know, what I've done in the past, mentoring is a strong passion of mine. And it's an action with the link crew. It's great. Very positive.
Trustee McRae?
I think it's really important that, and I think Carol has brought this up, and that is, how do you develop a welcoming culture? And I think that we have done an incredible job of this through this whole process of Team Apollo, Team Horizons, and Team Discovery. And that was right from the get-go. We involved the parents and the students. And it's developed a momentum And now we're seeing it in the school councils by the numbers of parents that are coming out. And I'm hoping that we can keep those parents engaged through, the suggestions that Carol Kaufman has made in regards to, asking for feedback from parents, getting them involved in things like Linkford right from the get-go, and just continuing that so that we can continue to keep these parents engaged. Some of our parents' councils, they were getting to the point where the numbers were dwindling down to the point you could hardly have a meeting. And just this last while, me being out, I've been out to most of the school council meetings, there's like 14 and 15 parents out. That's very welcoming, and that's the way it should be. So I'm just suggesting continue with the momentum and keeping them engaged.
Trustee McAllister?
This is my second year as a trustee, and it's also my second round of the transition process. And I concur with what most people are saying here in that it has been a success. However, I have 3 questions. First one, what types of recommendations were you not able to meet?
We're going to do them one at a time. Director? Or you're talking about from what was asked for?
Yes, from the parent committees and the various committees, the transition committees.
I'll say right off the cuff, not many. I know of none. That I can just say anything that came that was reasonable, John. Going back to what Trustee Carter said, we put up fences in several places, Jeremy's team, knowing that full well, our other experience with it, that we're going to keep some people happy now, but they may come back to say, oh, we may not need that as we go through. So, but we knew in order to work with the community that had to be done. I don't know of one that we didn't meet, and through the chair, I would go back to Jeremy and go back to Phil and potentially Charlotte if there was a recommendation from one of our committees that we weren't able to entertain.
You weren't able to build me a new gym at North Dundas.
Like I said, reasonable, John, reasonable.
Any feedback, Mr. Hobbs?
Mr. Chair, we actually, working with Phil and Charlotte, from the facilities perspective, went through a process that was specifically dedicated towards the facilities elements of the transition, which people naturally tended to focus on early on in the transitions. And what we inevitably found is that people's wish list, much like the chairs, were expensive. And so we actually spent quite a bit of time, the principals through their leadership at the local school level, and Phil and Charlotte managed to work the community through a process from going from the initial wish list to focusing on what was really important in order to make the school work for the kids immediately, and then some long-term changes that they'd like to envision. So we feel pretty strongly that by and large, even though we weren't able to necessarily accommodate the millions of dollars of requests that came out of the initial the initial sort of wish list, we worked through the process of identifying those priorities together, and then by the time we actually arrived at a scope of work that was reasonable to do with the budget and time available, people were pretty happy about it. And in a number of cases, we've gone back to schools after to tidy up and do some of the bigger things that we couldn't do in the first round. So I'm pretty confident that the communities are, based on what I've heard, satisfied with the scope of work we've done from a facilities perspective and what we plan to do going forward.
I think it's important for everybody to understand that I wouldn't lay claim to such a great idea. It was actually the implementation team's idea. Superintendent Patterson?
In addition to discussions regarding facilities and student safety and security, of course, which was high on people's agendas, there was very rich discussion about programming opportunities for grade 7 and 8 students. And I think I can remember, particularly at Almont District High School, we had very good discussion about math instruction in the intermediate grades and then into the high school. And So that is certainly something that the program department under Associate Director Ian Carswell is looking at. And while that might not, you may not see the improvements in a quick turnaround, it's certainly something that our school effectiveness superintendents and our principals and teachers are working on through the hubs and nodes and through other opportunities as well. So while facilities and student safety take very high emphasis in these kinds of discussions with parents, right on the heels of that was the educational program for their children. And I would have to say that we are certainly paying very close attention to that and trying to make those improvements. But that in itself, as you know, is a journey, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Director?
And further to that interesting question, Trustee McAllister, I have to let you know that we've had significant support from our secondary school teachers in reconfiguring entire hallways. And in several places we have moved very large historical art rooms into other places where we could reconfigure 2 classes, not 1, and to have the savings that come from that. And it could not have been done without a really reasonable people who said, I can see the big picture, what you're trying to do here. We'll move this down the hall or do this, or we'll give up this particular room for that. And I was very, very pleased with the cooperation and the professionalism of our teachers, our EAs, and I think Charlotte nailed it down. I think the principals did a magnificent job of making sure that each of the rocks was turned over. And then going back to be specific, we had some what people thought were legitimate, thinking, if you're going to move all these kids here, we're going to build a third gym on the school, which, there wasn't a third gym on that school when there were 1,500 kids. And you may remember times when some of our schools actually, now we're up to 778, but some of those schools had 1,500 kids in them at their heyday in the late 70s and so forth. And I think the veteran staff members reminded people of that this school has seen 1,500 before, the school has seen 800 or 1,000 kids before. This is not unreasonable. Those voices were heard in the staff rooms, and that made our work easier, and it also helped us to perhaps be more aggressive at hitting our deadlines, because what I was absolutely pleased with is that when we walked through the schools, we were ready on the first day of school and so I know Jeremy's department gets a great deal, but we moved hundreds of teachers into new locations, EAs and office administrators, and everyone was where they were supposed to be on that first day, and it was a transitional and operational, a great day for the board.
Number 2?
Number 2 has been answered. It pertained to the challenges that still remains, and I think that you have addressed that. The third question is the flip side of this. We've gone from K-8, many K-8 schools. I hope we are not neglecting the K-6 schools, and that they are being reinforced with as many resources as possible. I guess that's the question.
I thank you, John, because I wanted that. And I guess, I visited the feeder schools too, and I haven't had any of the staff saying bring them back. I've had none of the teachers that have said, well, we miss the noise of those 13, 14-year-olds, that those pubescent ones who, and we know I've always said the teenager, the definition is they run everywhere, and when they get there, they hit someone. What I've noted in many of our new K-6 schools is a quiet intensity about them. And all the conversations we had, excuse me, where would the leadership go? These grades 5 and 6 have all jumped in.
Trustee McMillan.
Through you, Chair. We've discussed a lot of the positive things that have happened. We have done a lot of work to get the buildings ready, and we've done a wonderful job. We've done a wonderful job of getting the kids transitioned into the buildings. We've done a wonderful job making them feel comfortable in our buildings. My concern, and I think the Superintendent Patterson started on that path, is the programming. We are now 12 almost 12 years into the 21st century. We know that adolescent learners have specific needs. In fact, I believe we did a study a few years ago, Intermediate Manifesto or something like that. We know exactly what the student learner needs at the grade 7 and 8 level. We are incredibly slow at bringing that transition in terms of modernizing how we educate our grade 7 and 8 students. I can't speak for all schools. I know the Gananoque Secondary School is a model of what an intermediate division should look like. That division is on fire. These kids are dealing with relevance. They're dealing with engaging learning experiences. It's just amazing, and I'm sure, John, you've been down there to see it. Absolutely phenomenal. That's a minority. That should be the majority. The majority of our intermediate divisions should look like that, because that is what our intermediate students need. Just recently, if you check the emails, you see the en masse search for class sets of textbooks. That bothers me. It's not that textbooks aren't valuable. They are, as a resource. But if they become the sole source of teaching a grade 7 and 8 student their program, we've got problems. Because we're not in 2012, we're back in 1964. It's wrong. But there is some good stuff happening. So it's not really a question, it's a comment. We've got our kids in the building. We've done a wonderful job getting the 7/8s there. We have the most glorious opportunity now to move education forward with this new culture that's been created in our high schools. The kids are excited. Staff is doing what they know best. Yes, we have hubs and nodes. Is that paying dividends? I don't know. It's a very slow process. We've got teachers talking, but talk is great. Are we getting action from it? I don't know. So I'm just putting that out as a concern. We've done a wonderful job getting them there. Now the time is to get them moving and doing something positive.
Director.
Trustee Millen, you and I have always been on the same page with this one.
Agree.
And I agree now the board
Has created the conditions.
for the teachers to excel in with their kids.
The monkey now is on our back to say, Gananoque Secondary School, when you walk up that end, that cannot be a one-off, and those are just exceptional teachers, and gosh golly, I wish I was there. And we have several pockets of excellence that are going on as you go through. What we have to do now through the manifesto, the middle level manifesto, is get at the nature of serving the adolescent learner. And that will be our true test. We've created now the proper sizes, because you don't have a class of 7 here and a class of 18 and a combined class. You've got a good nucleus of kids to work with. Now let's go that particular way. And I agree, this is the time to cut the hay or bale the hay or get her going, because we've created good conditions for learning. Let's get going. Sorry, Val, I saw that look.
Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in what Trustee has just said, and I wonder if we could have some examples or some plans, for example, to surmount that original chasm of elementary FTO, secondary school OSSTF, of their customs and culture. An example of how you've overcome that.
Through you, Chair, there are not many examples. One of our biggest fears that we have created, and Trustee McMillan is so dead on, we have created these absolute great conditions. We have created great situations to congregate kids so that there can be a variety of learning activities directed at the age level, the maturity level, where students are, the interest, engage-based learning that's there. One of the fears that I know that some of the teachers have said to me that I don't want this grade 7 and 8 to look like the grade 9 class. I want the grade 7 8 class to look like the grade 9 class. If you're, and certainly we put the spotlight on Gananoque with this particular board meeting.
But the fact is that whole division is putting pressure on the whole school to, as Trustee McMillan said, to come and join us in the 21st century, which we're 12 years into, nearly 13 or 13th year, saying, you know,
let's get going here. And I think that will be the true pressure. My concern, and I say this from my perspective, the 7, 8, 9 years are really in the curriculum, almost the lost years with the Ministry of Education.
and what we have to do is that we can wait for it to be discovered.
Or listen to the leading voices in middle level education to say, this is the way to do it, and this is what has to happen. And what I'm concerned with is that, and
we know the teachers, again, in the intermediate level, have a particularly
focused view that everyone can learn, and they learn at their pace, and let's pick it up as they go through. And then they present learning in an integrated, mature manner that reflects the capacity of the 7s and 8s to do that. What we have to do is say that's not a one-off. We've got to be able to say that this can happen in other places. And what we have to do, and we have to demand from our faculties of education that they do things differently. And as far as I know, and I sit on a university board of governors with a faculty of education, is no one is talking pedagogically about the middle level learner. It is almost a beast to itself, and I Trustee McMillan, you were down there at SUNY. It's almost like, you know, the K-6s we love, and they're sort of funny and pimply in 7, 8, 9, and then we like to teach them again when they become, you know, grade 10, 11 students. We have now the ability to do it. I think we have to somehow, and whether that's going to be direction from the board, it may be, I don't see it coming from the ministry. I don't think that this piece that they really understand is probably going to be something that we nail down ourselves.
So what do you, when you talk about direction from the board, what are you thinking of? You want us to ask you to do a summit on it, or?
Very well. I think that one of the things that we know our board has over the last 7, 8 years, if it's going to get done, it's going to have a charter.
Charters are action-orientated. They have a life, they have a champion, they have a thing to go with, and it also gives it status. It means that it's going to be reviewed by the board. It's going to be supervised 4 times a year by me. It means that the person who's the champion of this has to come forward and talk about it 4 times a year in supervision. And you as a board, unlike all the other hundreds of things we do here, you can spotlight this at any time, whether it's, you know, you want to see E47 or you want to see W2, you can ask for that to come up and say, what's the progress on that particular one? And so right now, certainly the meeting has gone in a different direction. This was a celebration that we've created the conditions for the kids to learn. Trustee McMillan that says, now, are we doing it the right way? That's a really different question.
Trustee McPherson?
I'm not going to sleep here. This is something that has turned 180 degrees. I'm one of the veterans of Boundary 2020, and school trustees at that time were probably one of the most unpopular people in Eastern Ontario. This is the first year I've had phone calls from parents who are not being offered 7 to 12, begging to get in to where we do offer it, literally prepared to pound down the doors. And the next question I get from them is, when is it coming to our communities? And I represent one of those holdout communities in Ward number 2 at PDCI. The message I am taking to my school councils, and I have for the last year and a half, is that it will come eventually. One of the questions, like we're sitting here tonight and we're praising the 7 to 12 model, and I personally think it is a great model. However, the questions that I'm going to get asked when we do start the process in the birth family schools is, what does a K-6 school look like, and what can we expect? Because they are the ones that are going to be so-called left behind. And I think that when we did Boundary 2020, we listened very hard. We have experienced a process similar to what the Limestone Board went through when they swung over to 7 to 12 modeling. A great many of the precautions we have taken have proven to be unnecessary. And So when we do go into, well, perhaps the Smiths Falls and the Perth Family Schools, I think when we do our public consultations, and I'm assuming we will, is not only can we tell them what to expect from a 7 to 12 school, but what a K to 6 school will look like because that's where people are concerned about schools, same as they were during Boundary 2020.
Yeah, and the good news is we have, of course, one particular jurisdiction, Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, where they have a bevy of K to 6
tremendous
schools.
experience now.
Yep.
Like I see this personally as an easy sale in my community, simply because of success it's been elsewhere.
Bring them down.
Okay, Trustee McCray.
I'm very interested in taking a day and going down and seeing this program in Gananoque. I guess, so what is it, through you, Chair, to the Director, what is it that sets this program in Gananoque above others? And Director, are there other examples of programs within our province that we might be able to gather information or that are kind of the cream of the crop in terms of the 7-8 model? Like in terms of setting a charter, there must be other, in the province of Ontario, other 7-8 models similar to Gananoque, or they're better than Gananoque, or maybe a similar flavor, or what are we seeing throughout the province for the 7 and 8?
Through you, Chair, I'll answer the second one really easy first. No.
Pardon?
They're not good examples throughout the province.
There are.
These are the forgotten years. They're very, very difficult years. It's not, I would say you have to be a very special teacher to understand. You have as president of the Ontario Middle Level Educators for years being involved in middle level education, you have the most volatile period of a person's life, and they're in grades 6, 7, and 8, particularly 7, 8, 9, 10. You have a little boy who walks into Rockland, 4 foot nothing, and is 89 pound and just afraid. They walk across the grade 8 graduation. This little guy's now in 18 months. He's 6'1", and he's still really, really thin, but you know he's going to fill up as you go through. And you should take a look at this, is that the only other time in a person's life where they have that dramatic a change in their brain size, their physical size, all of those things, the demand for sleep, and we also know at that particular age level, the socialization component, that friends become much more important than parents. Friends become much more important than even television, and the different things. And all of a sudden, I went on Facebook, and they're 12, or 11 and 12, and they want to have their own. And recognizing that is absolutely natural. The only other time is actually that time between about 6 months and 2 years of age, when your little guy is laying or girl's laying in the manger, and all of a sudden they're walking and terrorizing. That's one of the other dramatic times. And what has happened with the outstanding teachers, and I certainly consider Trustee McMillan one of those, is you start where the learner is, and you co-plan where the learner is to establish the conditions for learning with a teacher who sees himself as much more of a guide and facilitator of discovery than they see themselves as a person who's rudimentally sort of just thing. And so what you have across the province of Ontario, and I hate to say this, you have pockets of excellence in certain places where people have philosophically absolutely bought and believe in the middle level practice of adolescently appropriate education. Mm-hmm. And those people have paid very close attention to some of the leading edge, Dr. Lonsbury, Dr. Nancy Doda, the people who have sort of been those voices saying, you can't teach them like they're in grade 6, and you can't teach them like they're in grade 9. They're unique at that level. And if I was to take you through again tomorrow, what you have is someone would consider it's not play-based, because that's not what it is, but it's designed around projects, it's designed around multiple different levels of learning. Let me give you an example. You would have perhaps a novel study going on that would take on a huge, gigantic issue of tolerance and acceptance. So the students are reading a book on race and race-related issues in Afghanistan. They'd be reading that, And the great teacher would be preparing art-related things that go with that. And so the classroom that I was in, the person was doing a kite study, wind and kite to go with it, because in Afghanistan, in this particular, where the kids were reading a novel, kite flying was a major portion, a chapter of the book. So the kids were all making kites and doing them with flight, and then in the backyard, they were doing their art around that, and then they were taking their math down the hallway about, trajectory, force, and all tied into the very novel they're involved in. So what they went into was a day of totally integrated learning, and this takes really, really specialized skill set, because it starts where the kids are at today, and then you're going to take them along their journey. And I'm not sure, I'm hoping I'm giving this due justice with Trustee McMillan looking over my shoulder, but it is a way of, you're starting where they are, you know where you want to take them to, and then you set the rigorous pace for the learning to go that way. And what you have, and I say this very cautiously, we've had several situations, and South Grenville's one of them as well, where we had a number of really, really good intermediate teachers who understood this process. And what we wanted to make sure was that, they weren't all of a sudden going to become subject-driven, where all of a sudden you lose the special pace at which you're learning to say, okay, the bell just rang, we're not learning this anymore, we're going into music. Whereas if I took you into, and I don't want to embarrass you, we have a teacher who would move right to their music program with a study of, Egyptian-related music, and the study of drum-related beat rhythms that go with it. And that's a teacher who's really spending time trying to look at the issues to make learning a very special, emotional, social responsibility. And that's not easy, and quite frankly, it took me years to figure it out. And it's a wonderful way to teach. Boy, you get a great deal from it when you go that particular way. But it is really difficult, cautious to throw the book away and say, okay, let's jump in and do this. And what's happened is you have a nucleus, and you also have a vice principal, Marcia, who understands it. And so she cuts them slack and lets them move, and sometimes turns the bell off and says, we're not going to pay attention to it. And can you believe a school the way you turn the bell off as they go that way? But this is a very passionate way of teaching and engaging for the kids, and John's enjoying the fact that he gets invited down to the culminating things that the kids do, which are an interview with the mayor, an interview with different people to culminate their study on community. It's a really neat way. But we're going to have to retrain some people for this. And this, by the way, and I don't think Trustee McMillan was making light, this is huge work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Through you, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Swan.
Thank you very much, Director Thomas, and I found that really valuable, a lot of the information that you were providing for other schools throughout the boards. I think we really do need a charter for this. Integrated learning, I'm very highly supportive of. I'm very concerned about our EQAO results. I know that's a bad word to say, but I think the more we get involved in integrated learning, the more we can help these students to meet or exceed the provincial averages in all areas. And I think we need to gauge this to support our teachers, to offer them the courses, support them in the education, to provide this type of learning environment, especially now that we're a leader, again, with the 7 to 12 classroom environments. And I think this is a time that we can really take off with this.
So noted. I will add the topic of 7-8 to Management Council on a future agenda item. And perhaps, David, you can start putting some thought to what might be. But before you go straight to the charter, I think it would be useful to have another conversation here, maybe outlining some strategies and other things that so that maybe we could get behind some direction on where to take it. Good, I like that. Any other comments specifically on pushing the academic or the teaching for 7 and 8s? Trustee McRae?
Do we have the resources, financial resources? Because it sounds to me that there's a big training piece here involved.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair.
It doesn't
I have
have.
I have a deep working knowledge of all of this, and there are so many myths as to what it is and so many myths as to what it isn't. It is a mindset. It is a way of thinking that the textbook is not the main source of how you are going to engage students. It has to do with, it is not as complex as it sounds. It takes work. It takes innovation. It takes stepping back and really knowing your students and knowing the learner. It forces teachers to get away from a lot of things that they had to do when they went to school. But that's not teaching today. It is not, in my opinion, and I'm basing this on personal experience and having worked with some of the Gananoque people, once the mindset is in place, anything else is possible, and it is not an expensive program. And in fact, it is not a program. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of delivering education to adolescents. It's actually a way of delivering education to anyone. Adolescent, adult, makes no difference. Once you engage a student or engage a learner on a personal level and you look at their strengths and their weaknesses and address those, but it's not, I don't want to give the impression that the board would have to pour tons of money into training teachers. Once the mindset is there, everything else falls in place.
If you talk to some of the SUNY teachers that we have in our system, they're doing that. They don't even know they're doing it. They're doing it.
I supervise them, some of them. And the issue is obviously much bigger. We've talked, I know, not at the board table, about new teachers. And they do come in with that energy. They do come in with that desire. However, for some of them, over a very short period of time, they fall back into another way of teaching because they are being influenced by other people on staff who don't quite understand what they're doing, and to fit in, they're actually not being connected or mentored by the right people on staff. And I forget, Wayne Hulley used the terminology for that.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the
Something
terms
to do with
right
bees,
now.
wasn't it?
No, they had the enablers and
Yeah.
the fundamentalists and those
That
kinds
was
of
it.
people.
That was it.
This obviously isn't the avenue for me to talk about it, but it's a lot of myths about what it is and what it isn't. And it's not a matter of throwing textbooks away. Textbooks are a resource, and it's not a matter of getting rid of skills. You teach skills. They have to have skills to go to the next level. There's a lot of myths, but the bottom line is it's a mindset. These guys in Gananoque, and there are other teachers around the board. The only reason I say Gan is because I know that. I don't know what's going on in the other areas, but I'm sure we've got pockets of teachers out there who have developed that mindset, that there is a better way of educating the adolescent. And any one of them that have done it will never go back to the other way of teaching. Never.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of good stuff that we can talk about on that particular issue, and we'll
Yep.
bring it back. Trustee Carpenter?
Just to follow up with Trustee McMillan, there has to be an understanding by the intermediate educator how the intermediate student learns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what that needs to be refreshed, maybe is the word I want to use, in a lot of the teachers at that level. That, we spend lots of time working with the elementary, the kindergarten, junior kindergarten, grade 1, as to how those children learn. Well, it's completely different when they get to be junior and intermediate students. So it's a process, and it's hard work. I mean, for the person that's trying to change old school to new school, it is a big change, but it's beneficial for the children and for the professional themselves. And I hope we go that direction.
Trustee McAllister?
I look forward to seeing this on the agenda for future board meetings. I think it's a very valuable discussion. I also want to see the issue of EQAO put on the agenda at some point, but I caution you that EQAO, or standardized testing, in my opinion, is somewhat diametrically opposed to the kind of learning and teaching that you are suggesting. And if we can do both, all the better.
Yeah. Well, we'll have EQAO as a part of the framework. That'll be we'll have that, so we'll definitely have a conversation. Did you want to add something?
We'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk.
I just want to
Oh, I kind of was hoping that we'd have it right now.
No, I don't want to be here until midnight.
Okay, is there anything else on the 7 and 8 on this? So this kind of, sorry, go ahead, Trustee Collard.
I just wanted to add to what Trustee Carpenter said originally, that the parents were wondering why it's not a 7 to 12 school and why it's separate. The students have also noticed that, and student councils now have 7 and 8 representatives as a whole 7 to 12 student council. So it's kind of confusing them as to why it's 7 and 8 and then 9 to 12.
Yep. Well, hopefully, maybe principals need to better explain that on the.
But they've been told, like
Trustee Carter said, they were told to keep it really separate. You don't let those little guys down the hall.
No, what I don't know that as a student in grade 8 that you'd understand that part of the reason there is even a separation to begin with, beyond that, is that we have 2 separate contracts in effect, and that impacts it and things like that. And as Trustee Carpenter is suggesting, I don't think parents get that. So maybe our principals of those schools can ensure that at least people are aware that that's influencing some of the structural changes or decisions. All right, that's great. So this kind of brings to an end something that I was part of the beginning. Some of us around the table were part of that. All of the staff, many of the staff, Superintendent Patterson, Mr. Dawes. I spent lots of nights across the whole board. Jeremy's work, your leadership director, all the implementation teams that were involved, all the ARCs that were involved, and some people that were on the ARCs. Trustee Swan is now a member of the board. That was a huge process, and regardless of where you sat as in terms of support or not, it's irrelevant. Everybody's played an important role, and I want to thank everybody for that. Special thanks to Charlotte and Phil, who shepherded this through from the administration side so deftly, and I think demonstrating to all the way we do business, which is a reflection of our character traits. So I appreciate your work, and we are expecting that we have a report. I'm asking for a report that would sort of summarize what we've done, and there were a number of things in the report that when we passed it that were kind of left undone, and I think we need to bring that back to the board. So Trustee McPherson touched on some of the unfinished business, so I think we'll look forward to that, and hopefully the not too distant future.
take that to management council then?
Yeah. All right, so that's great, everybody. Could I get a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole? Trustee, got everything right? Trustee McMillan, Trustee McPherson, all in favor? Okay, it's great. So we will reconvene at 8:30 for the board meeting. All right, everyone. Get everybody to come back to the table.
Right. Good timing.
Call the meeting to order. Has our attendance online changed? Trustee Richards, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Trustee Swan, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
So attendance doesn't change, Director. So we'll take the roll call as read.
Bless you.
That was well done. My mother watched last week. She didn't understand the double attendance. She thought that you were just checking up.
You need checking.
Thanks to your mother. Approval of the agenda. Trustee McMillan. Trustee McCray. All in favor? Any declarations? Oh, sorry.
That's all right, I already did it. It's good.
You didn't have to rejoin the meeting.
I had to close off the other one.
You know what? The great thing is I got that, so you don't have to. We don't have to. You may have.
Greg, do I have to rejoin the meeting to vote? I'm getting an error message.
Yep.
Okay.
You may have to. Somehow I was able to stay connected, but
How do we do that?
I don't know why.
For the meetings?
Yeah, I'm special. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting, public session, September 12th. Trustee McMillan, seconded by Trustee Karkner. Any errors or omissions? No. All in favor? There it goes. Okay, there are no action items stemming from the Committee of the Whole meeting September 12th. Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on then to the report, Special Education Advisory Committee. Trustee McAllister?
The report will be fairly brief. We received an excellent presentation concerning the review of the IEP process from Vice Principal Nancy Holman and Principal John Gow. We learned a lot from that process, and what I found rather interesting about it is that there was one student involved, and that student had a significant role to play in creating the final document. I don't know. I guess the other issue, we will be asking you for support for a motion at the next meeting concerning two issues that came to us by correspondence, which the SEAC committee felt were important. So we will be seeking support for, we will be recommending them for support of the board. That's about all for now, I think.
Are there any comments or questions? Okay. Thanks very much, Trustee McAllister, for your report. Any comments, trustees? Trustee Karkner?
I just wanted to thank some of the senior staff that I've been working with about a couple of issues that have gone on in two of my secondary schools. I don't know if this is the time to say that.
Sure.
I really appreciated David Coons and Val Allen kept me informed of events that were going on in my schools, and Susan Edwards. Even though I was away, I still got emails about it, and the staff and principals of the schools handled situations very well, and I want to thank them for that. It's great. Keeping me in the loop. I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Karkner. Any other comments? Trustee McPherson?
Just a quick one. Last Friday, I kind of had a unique experience as a trustee, in that maybe it's not the venue to share it, but we had a principal that was new to the community and really didn't know one end of the township from another. And I jokingly offered to take him on a road trip. And I know that how much I enjoy my road trips as a director and some of the superintendents sometimes. So we spent 2 hours driving around our township, and I, being a native, I gave him a fair amount of history about the township. And at the end of 2 hours, he thanked me most enthusiastically, and I hope it helps him in his role as a principal. But it was a rather unique experience as a trustee. So I thought I'd share that with you.
Did you do it in the school bus?
No, I took the big truck that I drive.
So
to
I get the
board
school
meetings.
bus and he gets the good truck.
And fortunately, he was a Ford fan, so he didn't mind. But I did leave the dog behind.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. That, it just reminded me, just last week, on a nice day, I hopped on the Harley, and I took a drive out through Smith Falls and through Perth, and then I got down through Elmsby and Elmsby, and down into Carlton Place and up into Elmont. And what really struck me as I was going through every one of these small towns that are part of our board is how unique every town was. And what became very clear to me was the whole direction of what we're talking about when we're dealing with Queen's Park and the power of local representation. Each one of those towns that I pass through is very special and has special needs to those people. And it just becomes very clear when you get in and take a drive through there, just the power of local representation, what it really is all about. And it's those drives that you take that you see that.
Thank you, Trustee McMillan. Director?
I'd just like to wish the chair good luck tomorrow on Friday. We have been working on something for about 2.5 years or more, and that is an organization of directors and chairs to help with the voice of public education in Ontario. And Greg and I have worked every back room you can and every front room. And we had our first meeting a couple of months ago, and Greg